Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 13th of February 2024, and these are the stories that we will try to decipher during the course of the show. We'll begin with the latest as far as the Palestine-Israel conflict is concerned. Today is day 130 of that very conflict, where on the one hand, Jordan's King Abdullah II and Joe Biden say that they are going to do the needful in order to curtail the civilian deaths or the civilian butchering, or the killing, should I say, as far as Palestine is concerned. On the other hand, the CIA chief William Burns is also in Cairo for the latest round of discussions on a truce that could temporarily halt the fighting that is going on as far as Gaza is concerned. Speaking of Gaza, there is a lot of speculation on when the ground offensive in Rafah is going to begin. And a lot of people are very apprehensive of what could be the repercussions of any such ground assault if and when that happens, because as we speak there are 1.3 million Palestinian refugees that are crammed up in a very little space which is known as Rafah. And when there are other places where these people have nowhere to go, when and if this ground offensive happens, the number of casualties could be severe. This and more is going to be discussed in our first story on this conflict, this war between Israel and Palestine. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the farmers' protest in India. If you remember well, in the end of 2020 and 2021 began this whole farmers' protest for a series of demands that they wanted because of some measures that the Indian government at that time had taken. The government is the same, and now the farmers are back again on the streets, and they are in New Delhi, on the outskirts of New Delhi and in New Delhi, because what they want to do is they are pressing for the same demands that they had asked for in 2020, 2021. They had not been given those demands despite having been given the promises that those will be adhered to, and that is why this time the farmers are much better prepared and say they are going to stay here till all their demands are met with, whether it takes 6 months or even more. This is going to be our second story. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the migratory species that are facing a threat of extinction as far as the United Nations report on migratory species that has recently been launched. And it says that nearly half of the population of migratory animal species is showing decline, while nearly all the fish that are listed in the United Nations Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals are threatened with extinction. Then we are going to talk about the birth anniversary of our legendary poet, philosopher faizahmadfaiz, the 113th birth anniversary of legendary poet faizahmadfaiz is being observed today. He was born on this very day in Sialkot in 1911. He has a huge collection of work and has been given numerous awards by circles in Pakistan and across the world. We'll pay homage to Mr. Faizahmadfaiz today as well. And finally, we'll be talking about the first death anniversary of eminent artist Ziamohyeddin. He was not only an artist, he was an actor, broadcaster and producer. He was born on 20th of June 1931 and passed away on this very day last year at the age of 91. Let's begin with our first story, and that concerns day 130 of the protest, not the protest rather, the conflict, the war, the genocide that is happening in Palestine as we speak. And of course a huge question mark is as far as what is going to happen in Rafah if and when a ground offensive happens. The number of casualties could be staggering. We've been joined by PJ Mir. He's a senior analyst to discuss on this very issue. Mr. Mir, thank you very much to have joined us. Palestine says the states need to urgently and immediately intervene to stop Israel bloodshed, uphold the obligations under the Geneva Conventions, and in line with the International Court of Justice preventive measures order by immediately imposing sanctions and an arms embargo. Can that happen? Can we have any ounce of optimism in that context, or do you feel that the arms will continue to go to Israel by all the different countries concerned, and Israel will continue to butcher the Palestinians as it has been doing since the 7th of October last year?
Well, it reminds me of the Iraq War, when there was a million people march outside 10 Downing Street, and I was there witnessing it, and it went and nothing happened. And then, of course, we saw what happened in Iraq. Despite security reservations and prohibition, United States went ahead and launched this horrific attack on Iraq. The same thing which we are witnessing here, the whole world has condemned it. Even yesterday, one of the Australian senators, you know, they absolutely, demeaned what was going on in Israel, and of course, as we've seen other countries, but nothing has really come off it. All we are saying is that we're protesting, we don't agree with it, we totally condemn it, but in effect, nothing has come of it. Their Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you know, he has categorically said that till Hamas is not cleaned out or wiped out of Gaza, they will not stop this. Although, as you know, President Biden has said that they must look after the civilian population, when they attack. But why should they attack? I mean, look at the armament they're using against those people. Look at the weaponry they're using against those people, and you're killing everything. I mean, you killed nearly 28,000, over 28,000 people. You've injured over 68,000 people, and you're continuing all this killing. I mean, this is not killing, in my opinion. This is genocide, and this is genocide of the Muslims who live around there, and no one seems to be, talking about it. We are talking about human beings. Forget the religious aspect. Forget, what faith they belong to. There are Palestinian Jews. There are Palestinian Christians. There are Palestinian Muslims. I mean, we've got to start thinking as far as humanity is concerned, not religion. So what we are talking about is occupation of Israel of that area, and that needs to be rectified. And the Muslim bloc can only play a very important part. Proviso, they sit together. I'm so glad that Saudi Arabia has taken a strong step. Of course, Jordan is next to it, Egypt is there, Syria is there, but we need to be getting all the Islamic bloc to talk about it and really hold some sort of a meeting which basically counters, particularly the Americans, who really, I'm so sorry to say, who really are taking no interest in in these loss of lives. So I don't see any future, as you asked, any future remedy till the time we don't gather and show a united front as far as people are concerned. Yes, there are aspects of religion, but again, religion doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I mean, ironically, both are
This is
cousins.
more than a religion, PJ Mir Saab. This is a question of humanity. This is a question of basic human values that are being trampled since the 7th of October. Now, you spoke of Jordan. King Abdullah II is in Washington with the Joe Biden. They have had talks on this very issue, and they are, looking for some kind of a solution and the end to civilian massacre. Secondly, the CIA chief is also, as we speak, talking in Cairo with the Israeli and the Qatari officials on some kind of a ceasefire or a truce. Will these talks have any, output whatsoever?
I think they need to be talking to the Hamas. They're liberators. They're fighting for their cause because they believe that Israel has occupied their land. I mean, when we speak of the Palestinian issue, Omar, it is not the Palestinian issue. It is the occupation of Palestine. It is the occupation of Gaza. So we need to renegotiate and talk. Well, when we speak of like that, then Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, he's not interested in talks. He's not. He's made up his mind of totally obliterating the Palestinians out of the sight. So where do we stand? I think this is again a time for superpowers like Russia, China, and of course the United States to speak and work on it. In the longer prospect, rather than what President Trump did without any consultations, he annexed Jerusalem and made it part of Israel. How could you do that? I mean, it was a part of Jordan. Since, of course, after the 67 war, things changed, but that was still in occupation. And the same thing had happened, as you know, when Article 370 and 35A were implemented in the occupied part of Kashmir. And they did exactly the same what the Israelis have done. So I think we need to strengthen, our political debate, our political, sort of, stressing it out that, we need to be talking long term. Otherwise, these two areas, today we speak of Gaza, tomorrow we'll be speaking of Kashmir. So these are two focal points which are conflicting points for world peace. And as long as the world superpowers don't realize that, I think one day or the other, there'll be another theater which might be open, which I certainly hope it doesn't. But at the end of the day, we need serious talks, not just condemnation. Oh, that we condemn this and we condemn that. No, at this present moment in time, like I said, 28,000 plus people have died. People have, there are 15,000 people living in an area of 1 kilometer. Just think what their living conditions might be. Just think, look at the weather, look at the people, look at the medicines are not reaching them. There's, no, there is no
There's a dearth
nourishment.
of everything. There's a dearth of all kinds of supply that is going to them. You were talking of the superpower. Let's talk about, the arms supply to Israel by the superpowers. There is a Dutch court that has stopped the Dutch government from supplying parts for F-35 to Israel. At the same time, the US, I'd like to give some specifics, gives 3.8 billion US dollars in military aid annually to Israel. And there is no indication that Washington is going to hold up to such aid. The US State Department says, and I quote, cutting aid would not be more impactful than the steps Washington has already taken. On the other hand, the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said that the way to reduce civilian casualties would be to stop arms supplies to Israel. Whose statement should we go with, and whose statement is more powerful? I'd like your take on that.
I think the statement basically should be based on what has happened in Australia to the Aborigines, what has happened in the United States to the Red Indian. These are the two focal points in contemporary history, which we can easily quote. So the next step or the next theater is these people in Palestine, and of course I'll add Kashmir into it. So who is going to take the initiative? Well, I'm sorry, people die in Kashmir, no one takes any notice of it. Yes, because it's Israel which is the focal point there, and they control the American economy, and they're the ones who call the shots. They've got the media on their side, and they've got everything on their side. So yes, they do call the shots because their public PR is far more stronger than perhaps what we have here in this part of the world. So I think what we need to be doing is organizing. Omar, organizing. We used to do tremendous amount of work in the European Union. We used to have 42 members of the European Union to come along and listen to the plight of the Kashmiris and of course the Palestinians.
We still have European Union parliamentarians who listen to us. I've interviewed many of them. I've also interviewed British parliamentarians who side with the Pakistani stand as far as Palestine and Kashmir is concerned. But at the end of the day, it is the majority that that can make that change. And apparently that majority isn't there when it comes to the Western powers, the Western parliaments, despite the pressure from the people in all of these Western countries through numerous protests that are happening as we speak.
Yes, but at the same time, you see, when we say that there are friends of Pakistan, don't forget the British parliamentarians is another group who are friends of Kashmir or friends of India. And they have their own lobby, we have our own lobby, and this lobby continues. But again, nothing really happens of it. I mean, all this is doing of the British government, of the yonder years. They're the ones who are responsible for all what we are experiencing in this modern day and time. Israel is one of them. You talk about that. The Balfour Declaration, he was the foreign secretary at the time, and it was him who started all this simply because he gave the land away to Lord Rothschild. And in return, Lord Rothschild gave Israel, at that moment in time, which was all Palestine, gave in 1917 a piece of land which we call the Finger. And it is in a place called Metula. On the right-hand side is the Golan Heights. On the left-hand side is Lebanon. And of course, there's a gate which is known as the Bibi Fatima Gate. And down there are these, there's a lot of these reservations which we call Harbor Shiram, where there are over 70,000 Indian and Pakistani Jews who live there. So basically, they have made it in such a way that, whether you, me, or rest of the world speak, or even, other television stations like Al Jazeera, when they speak so blatantly and openly, nothing is heard of them. Nothing is really heard of them at all. But I'm so happy that Turkey and President Erdogan has taken
Yes.
a very strong step.
Very strong. But this is not the
on the-
first time that Mr. Erdogan has taken a strong step and has criticized Israel. He has done that time and again. But is his voice being, does his voice have any effect whatsoever? China has also taken out a very strong statement as far as the current situation is concerned. Are these voices being heard? That is the whole question.
These need to be heard not outside on public, press conferences or other events. This particular issue has to be addressed in the United Nations. I mean, I see today United Nations as a toothless body, as always. I mean, it's a toothless body when it comes
But
to.
what can they do? They have the veto power. They have countries that have veto power. Whatever is put in the National Assembly or in the Security Council is vetoed. So how can they even pass a resolution when one or more of the countries who openly back Israel have the veto power?
This is a catch-22 observation. I mean, if Russia comes in, Russia gets condemned. Look what they're doing in Ukraine. So, where do you come in? And China, again, they speak of them, as far as human rights are concerned. So it's all a catch-22 situation, but somebody really has to come up and break this egg and speak blatantly, openly, and speak for the humanity, not for people. Forget people. It's humanity which we're talking about, as you earlier on, commented. So who is going to talk about humanity? Who's going to take this flag up there? Because everyone who does, then of course there are the undercurrent forces which really step up and play their own part. So I think probably this should start in the European Union, because European Union is far more humane than perhaps even what the United Nations, are concerned. And NATO, well, it's quite clear what NATO is all about. It's all about the United States of America and nothing else. In fact, I had a meeting with the ambassador from United Kingdom, Sir Peter, I forget his full name, when he said, look, we are all puppets around here. It's the US who basically controls NATO. Well, there we are. That's the end of the story. And even in the United Nations, this is the same story. So somebody, or the people of America, really have to come out and speak for themselves. As we've seen, American Jews have come out that we are not part of this, what is happening in Israel. And I'm so happy because they speak, what is rationale. And this is something which needs to be taken internationally. But by whom? Somebody is going to take a step, as to your question, to take this momentum forward. Otherwise, well, the killing continues and people continue to die.
Mr. Mir, the fact is also that this whole conflict is also going beyond the borders of Palestine. We are also seeing Hezbollah coming in. We're also seeing other forces joining in the fray. France has delivered a proposal to Beirut to end hostilities with Israel and settle the disputed Lebanon-Israel frontier. Do you feel that countries such as France could somehow curtail the broader impact of this conflict?
America and Israel, they are more keen and interested in what Iran might do. I've been in control and command center in Tel Aviv, where on a huge, mega this screen, they've got their sights onto Iran if Iran launches any rockets or any attacks on them. They're on 24/7 vigil. Whereas on the other side, of course, you mentioned Hezbollah. Hezbollah is there, and Hezbollah continues to fight Israel through one way or the other. But again, when Hezbollah fights, who suffers? Lebanon. Because Israel, retaliates on Lebanon, and they destroy, cities like Beirut and others, which they've really taken down in cinders. So again, all this needs to be, to be talked about, and we need to sit on a table to negotiate and talk. I mean, we've got to discuss the fault lines. We've got to discuss what Israel wants. I mean, as far as the Zionists are concerned, I mean, the very concept of Zionism is occupation, is expansion. That is what the whole thing is. When in Israel, when I went there, right from Metula on to Jerusalem, believe me, the Israelis, the Jews there were disgusted what the governments were doing. And at that time, the government was of Prime Minister Albert. and they were absolutely disgusted. Even the advisor to Prime Minister Olmert, Dennis Seaman, he said to me that these Zionists, they're basically destroying our image. But what do we do? He says they're a liability to Israel, but at the end of the day, they control they control the finances. So it's an ongoing enigma and a battle, which again needs to be highlighted internationally.
PJ Mir Sahab, also, where it's so strange that on the one hand we talk about Zionism, on the other hand they talk about anti-Semitism, and the whole, the people, quote unquote, who have gone through the post World War II effects are the same people who are inflicting those kinds or even severe brutalities on the people of Palestine. Is there some psychological issue here with the people, the way they are, perpetrating these barbarities on the Palestinians? Is there something else on the horizon? And you talked about 1917, you talked about how a little piece of land was given, and now how with a small amount of people, and now there are 9 million plus people in, and they continue to harbor more and more people in the territories that they continue to occupy illegally from the people of Palestine. Where is all of this going to end? My first part of the question is this. B, do you feel that the results of the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court, where Chile has gone, will have any effect whatsoever on Israel, so long as it is backed by important countries in the West?
First of all, you've got to get Germany out of this quagmire of I'd call it a guilty conscience. I mean, if they have done what they did to the Jews in the Second War, well, they must realize, instead of siding with Israel right now, they should be siding with humanity, because this is exactly what the Jews are doing and what the Germans did. Well, not the Germans, but the Nazis, what they did. So they've got to get out of this trance. They've got to actually come out and support humanity, not just side up Israel. For whatever reasons. I don't know whether they've got the 1974 Olympics in their mind, what the Palestinians did in the Olympics. I don't know what they have in their mind. But at the end of the day, look, Nelson Mandela, for 24 years, he was on Robben Island, and he comes out, and there's a truth and reconciliation situation going on. Why can't there be, not done on this part of the world? Yes, one day Nelson was a terrorist, and the next moment he's a world statesman. What did he do wrong? He only spoke for his people, and at the end of the day, credit goes to Botha and de Klerk for finishing off perhaps the apartheid, which we had seen in South Africa for a long time. And today, it is from the very same country, a barrister of Islamic origin, that doesn't really matter, but she's the one who took the case into this International Court of Justice. So what we need to see is, in a broader and a bigger prospect, that these issues do not resolve world problems. These issues create more terrorism. These issues create more bitterness, more hatred, and the hatred then turns between religions. And although there is no religion
on that, but the fact is that we are going towards a clash of civilization and a clash of religion, and this is only being exacerbated by this current conflict that we are seeing escalating since the 7th of October. And the way things are going, I don't see any of this, stopping or pausing anytime soon. And with what is the ground offensive that Israel is, all prepared for, as far as Rafah is concerned, this is going to create more havoc. And I don't know what the repercussions could be. We can only hope for the best, pray that the maximum of Palestinians stay safe, and that some sense of sanity comes to Israel and all the countries that are supporting it. Thank you very much, PJ Mir Sahab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this day 130 of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. We can only discuss, highlight what is happening, and try to ascertain what can be done. But at the end of the day, we can only talk about it. The people or the communities or the nations that can really take those actions are those that need to be hearing all of this and do something before it's way too late for the world to realize. Let's come to our second segment, and that concerns India. Now, India is having a farmers' protest as we speak. In the end of 2020-2021, there was another farmers' protest that went on for a very long time, around 13 months. And what happened was, at the end of the day, the government of Narendra Modi, that is also currently the same government, had negotiated and had come to some kind of a solution. But what happened is all the points of negotiation that were agreed upon by both the sides were not catered to properly, and therefore the farmers are back. There were two union ministers who tried to thwart the attempts by going to negotiate with them, but nothing happened of that. And the farmers, as we speak, are on the outskirts of Delhi. There are a lot of precautions that have been taken by the government in New Delhi, but what does it all point towards? It points towards a complete inadequacy as far as the Narendra Modi's government is concerned, and a total disregard for any other community apart from the Hindu community, which propagates the whole RSS or the Hindutva ideology. To talk more about that, we've been joined by Dr. Syed Aleem Gillani. He's a regional affairs expert and joins us in the studio. Dr. Gillani, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Gillani, thousands of farmers are marching towards Delhi. Say that they are prepared for the long haul. They have enough ration, they have enough diesel to last for months. The borders have been sealed to prevent them from entering the New Delhi. And of course, they are protesting over a series of demands, including a minimum support price for their crops, which is a follow-up of the 2020 famous discussions that happened, but nothing happened as a result of that. What are you expecting? A long protest like the last time, violence, some kind of a resolution to that, because we all know that the Indian elections are about to happen in a couple of months' time.
Thank you, Omar, for inviting me on talking on such an important issue today. Before I start replying to what you have asked, I would like to first decipher what exactly is happening in the India right now. They have, whether you consider them, there has been heated debate in the media, the resilience of Indian democracy, and then the credibility of the institutions to deal with such problems. As you were rightly pointing out towards the clash of civilization in the previous part, what is happening around in India is that they have adopted exclusivist school of thought. Whosoever is aligning with the argument of BJP, and particularly which is influenced by Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, they consider it a narrative, a national narrative. Whosoever want to show them the mirror that this is the reality, they always come up with an argument that you are not supposed to say anything against this, whatever the reality is, what the Modi regime wants, not what is happening on ground. Now, let us see the famous claim about the Indian democratic. You know, when we were studying, we always considered that international community came up with the idea India as a democracy. What exactly the democratic attributes are for the India to call it a democracy? There is substantive versus procedural aspects of democracy. You know, in order to call a successful democracy, it is a holistic concept. When I refer to the substantive part, it means that they have to ensure the credibility of public opinion. You cannot deny it. They cannot minus the credibility of the ruler, the answerability of the ruler. If they are going to do it, in the long run, they are going to lose this so-called claim of the fancy that they are a secular democracy. Second comes to the procedural part. I agree that elections are in time in India. They follow the stringent policies of it. But then what about the social equality of the citizens? What about the
But have they ever thought of the social equality of citizens? You know, seeing all the different events that have been happening in the last few years since the Modi government came into power, do you really see social equality?
This is what I'm asking is, this is what they are busy in making international community do, giving this impression that they are the biggest ambassador of secularism, separating state from church, but that in reality what is happening is you see the religious policies influencing and subjugating the rights of the minorities.
They might have separated the state from the church, but they have joined the mandirs and the state.
Exactly, this is what is happening around us. And it reminds me of a famous Johnson Amendment in the United States of America, when they gave the powers to Americans to ensure that there is no check and balancing on the church. Same is happening with as you rightly pointed out. So coming over to your part, what is so grave at the moment that entire international community and even vernacular media is looking at with the alarm bell, the alarm bell is raising. The point is, whenever you adopt structural violence as a mean, whenever you adopt to subjugate the rights of the people, deprive them from their legitimate right, the ultimate result is a chaos. The farmers have learnt their lessons from the previous protest. They have been given assurances. They have been made, they were given the promises that it will be done.
The promises weren't met with. The assurances were given, but were never applied to in letter and principle.
This is what happened in reality. So they have a very clear understanding that now the government, they will never see the selection of the moment. In academia, we call it ripe moment.
All right.
They adopted for it that the government should be under such duress that they have to accept the demands of the farmers. And see why there is so much cry and hue in the media. They are saying that at least if you are covering only 6% of the farmers which are investing in the wheat and rice crops, what about the rest of the people? Why the state is only concerned about running their own institutions? And most importantly, Omar, what about the institutional pluralism that India always talk about in their...
Which pluralism?
No pluralism is there. What they are doing is, even starting from the selection of the people who are serving in the institutions, responsible for giving the rights to the common man on the ground, they are biased and tilted toward it. Let me add another thing. My PhD dissertation was based on anatomy of Indo-Pak wars through prism of three images of war.
Okay.
What I decipher is, when my dissertation was sent abroad for foreign evaluation, trust me, it took me 1 year to establish this, that the Indian foreign policy is influenced by the Chanakya. They are asking me, the Indian lobby is so strong in the West, that how come you are arguing that it is influenced by this? And then I took 1 year to prove it, that how, with the references, that Indian foreign policy is the end result of Chanakya's teaching.
But it has always been, it's better to understand it and accept it sooner than later. Do you feel that the government will have no choice but to accept the demands, because this time the farmers are here to stay? They say that they are not budging till such time that the demands are met with in letter and in principle, not just through negotiations or promises.
If you meticulously create a dichotomy between the current scenario and what happened in the last year, the first thing that you will discern is that
that was end of 2020 and 2021.
This is. Now what happened was that now the other side, the farmers, are well equipped. What are the ways to address the government in the right manner? They got the experience on their back. They know the government is only giving intangible things, and they're not giving you something in black and white. They're only assuring you with the promises, and that is not quite enough to survive in an environment. This time what they did, they are taking logistics with them. Diesel is with them, and they, if you meticulously examine the statement by them, they are fully prepared. What it means, government has to accept whatever they are demanding, otherwise there will be a complete chaos, and the Modi's daydreaming of again coming in power will be shattered into pieces if they will not address this issue politically. It is a political issue, they have to reintegrate it.
Will it have national and international repercussions if, for example, this continues, or if there are casualties like the last time?
This time it will create international impact. Let me draw your attention toward what happened in the Canadian scenario.
The American scenario, in the British scenario, in the Pakistani scenario.
For the first time, the world realized that India always is very adroit at playing with the image what they carry, the slogan they carry. Remember, in English we call it euphemism. You say died instead of died, you say expired. Instead of garbage collector, you said sanitary engineer. This is what they're doing internationally. They give this impression that they are actually the one who are worried about resolving their root cause issues. But this time, if they'll same adopt a structural violence approach, or it will be converted into direct violence.
But structural violence is happening as we speak. We see the tear gas that is being thrown at the protesters at the borders of New Delhi. So if it starts with tear gas, it always ends with other forms of violence and then casualties. So there is going to be structural violence, and that structural violence has begun. What are going to be the repercussions? Are the repercussions, I mean, I'm talking in terms of casualties, going to be worse than what happened in 2020, 2021? Or will the government of India, under duress or under pressure because the elections are going to happen and that could create a furor amongst other communities, might curtail themselves from involving themselves in more violence?
What you need to understand here is, let us infer from a very common analogy. When you are bargaining over buying something, remember there are two types of conflict. One is issue-based conflicts and one is identity-driven conflict. This time these farmer parties have realized that government is in no mood to take care of whatever is happening on the back end.
Okay.
They are concerned about their own agenda, how to win the elections. And to be precise, if you can meticulously examine the previous annals of the Indian engagement, what they do, they always deviate the attention of the masses from the primary issue to
Pakistan card.
Pakistan card, which is always very welcoming in the India. But this time the situation is notoriously difficult for the Modi regime.
How so?
Because the other side, the parties, the farmers have chosen the right moment. They conducted the target practice for it. Okay, what will be our possible thwarting factors and how we are going to overcome it. Remember, if your opponent or the target party, they know the vulnerabilities in the government, they know how to tackle it. This time they are deadly because they are having the experience at their back end. So what I believe it, you will see in the future, in the foreseeable future, if the Modi regime will slightly adopt for any derogatory action against these parties, it will end up in a situation of where Modi will not be able to cover up again with the same slogan that he used to do in the past.
Congress is also criticizing the Modi government for this very gesture. But are the opposition parties, or is the opposition in India strong enough as we speak? Because they have tried to talk some sense into the Modi government, but nothing has come out of it. Has the opposition kind of lost its Midas touch, or do you feel that there's still some kind of hope for a healthy opposition in India to put pressure on the Modi government to curtail themselves, or to stop themselves from inflicting the kind of violence that, for example, they have been doing on the people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir?
You rightly pointed out the factor. When I was in the preceding part referring to the substantive part of the democracy, what actually I was referring to? Indians, particularly this Modi regime, have taken away the right of freedom to express yourself. The moment any anchor, any media person, and let me talk about the one who started on the Hindutva page on the Twitter. The very next day, the government official agencies and their respective tiers contacted the Twitter and they completely defaced the page on the plea that they are causing a national harm to them. So what it means, they have adopted for exclusivist school of thought. They believe that only people who have the right to live in India is who's aligning with the broader perspective of Modi regime. Whosoever will point finger on them, they have no right to remain in any key position.
So everything is subjective, whether it be violence, whether it be harm, whether it be pluralism, whether it be democracy, everything is subjective when it comes to India.
True, this notion is everywhere, even in the Indian media, which used to always defend their narrative. Now they are even criticizing what sort of freedom of expression they are enjoying in India, what kind of secularism they are talking about when they are not allowing the individual to even express their inclination toward. See the farmers' case for that matter. Second thing, they have the tendency of tilting at windmills. They create imaginary enemies to show that the country is in a big problem, and they deviate the attention of the masses from the primary issues to secondary issues. So in the current scenario, if the Indian regime is not going to change its way of engagement, international community is already seeing the vulnerabilities in India, the way it happened in Canada, in America. Now they realize that their blind trust in the so-called secular democracy image has shattered each and everything.
Something that I'd like to understand, you talk of vulnerabilities in India, but the fact is that somehow all the countries are bowing and kind of retracting their hard stance towards India. because of its geostrategic presence or its strategic importance. For example, what happened with Qatar? You know, the Navy personnel that were have been now set free and have left on the, and they were all given a sentence of the death sentence, but that death sentence has been repealed. You know, this then what happened in Canada, what happened in the US, are we hearing something, an outcome of all of that happening? Somehow all of that has been silenced. Is India that important a player that it can go, it can get away with murder, literally murder, and nothing happens to it? Where had it been any other country, the situation would have been entirely different.
I was waiting for this question. You will ask it. One, the problem is, I am being a scholar of international relations. This entire IR domain revolves around realpolitik. States have interest, and Morgenthau says nations have interest, not friendship. What they seek is India as a bigger market. Economically, they can send their products to India. Indians are famous for sending cheap labor across the globe. So you see, when they see their convergence of interest with India, they turn a deaf ear to whatever is right and whatever is wrong. See the Kashmir, what is happening there. Curfew for, can you quote any part of the world where the curfew has been imposed for such a long duration? Who was referring to the United Nations Council resolution? Where is international law? Where is the clauses of so-called responsibility to protect R2P? There is nothing. The problem is convergence of interest. America wants India to be pitched against China as a counterweight, right? And they are leaving no stone unturned to help India to raise that position. When America is on their back, definitely P5 has its impact, its elements of power, be its economy, its impacts on alliances, its geography is impacting it's the status quo power. What it means that whosoever is going to confront India, definitely one day, obviously, America will be supporting them.
All right, last question. I just want to understand. You talk of economy and how the countries bow down because of the economic power that India is. But what happens if such a protest continues for a couple of months? What could be the economic, result of this protest if it goes on for months and months? Because we know that agriculture is a very important part of India's economy. Would there be an economic downfall if the protest continues and India does not listen to their farmers' community?
There are two parts to your question. I would like to reply in two parts. One is the tangible aspect and one is the intangible aspect. In the modern world, elements of power also talk about your moral legitimacy. On the international ground, India is losing the moral legitimacy. I am again referring to the Canadian case. I am again referring to it was the first time they were exposed, brutally exposed. On the second part, as far as the economic fallout is concerned, definitely it is one of the core concern for India to quell this movement. Otherwise, they have to face the dire consequences in terms of economy. And if it will be prolonged, definitely the farmers and the people who are involved in it, it will have direct implications for the economy of India. So it is a two-way loss for them.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Syed Aleem Gillani, Regional Affairs Expert, who have joined us. It was our first interaction. Hope it will be a first of many. Thank you very much for have joined us. Kindly stay with us till the end of the show. We've just about 2-3 minutes to go. Let's talk about the last three stories. The first concerns a United Nations report that talks about migratory animal species that are threatened with extinction. Now, this report on migratory species of wild animals that was launched, in fact, yesterday, reveals that nearly half, almost 44% of the population of migratory animal species is showing decline, while nearly all the fish that are listed in the United Nations Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals are threatened with extinction. The report, which is the first of its kind, titled State of the World's Migratory Species and has been launched by the CMS, a United Nations Biodiversity Treaty, reveals more than 1 in 5 or 22% of these species are threatened with extinction. The main focus of this report is on 1,189 animal species that have been recognized by the parties as needing international protection and of course are listed under that. The two greatest threats as far as this report is concerned is to both these listed and all the migratory species, and are overexploitation and habitat loss due to human activity. These two are leading to the extinction of these species. Also climate change, pollution, invasive species are also having profound impacts on these very species. So the report has come out. Let's see when the action comes. Lastly, let's talk about the birth anniversary of legendary poet faizahmadfaiz. I had the opportunity as a kid to have met him many a times, and what a legend he was. And he was much more than a poet. I mean, there are no words to describe him as a person, as a visionary. Born on this very day in Sialkot in 1911, received so many awards, including the Nigar, the Lenin Peace Prize of Pakistan's Human Rights Commission, Avicenna Prize, and so many collections of work like Dast-e-Sabaz, Zindan-Nama, Sham-e-Shehr-e-Yara, and so many others. You know, he talked about humanity, he talked about social values and society, and he talked about things that are very true to us as human beings and us as a society. And his name lives on and will continue to live on because of this huge body of work that he has left behind. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Next, we have the death anniversary of Ziamohyeddin Sahab also being observed today. This is the first death anniversary of Mr. Ziamohyeddin. He passed away on this very day last year at the age of 91. He became very famous through a show on this very network, Pakistan Television, called the Ziamohyeddin Show in 1969. He was also part of the film A Passage to India and Lawrence of Arabia, two huge Hollywood pictures, and he remained the head of the National Academy of Performing Arts since its inception, and till he died. He was awarded the Hilal Imtiaz, Sitara Imtiaz and Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to the field of performing arts. May his soul also rest in eternal peace. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories, segments that pertain to us, you in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.